start. Thank you for zooming in all. My name is Ian Taylor. I'm a partner at Pair VC. We work with founders on their product and growth from day zero to build a company, and we seek to partner with those founders all the way to IPO. We've been fortunate to partner early with the founders of DoorDash, Branch, Gusto, Guardant Health, and many more world-changing companies. In addition to being a seed fund, we also host an accelerator twice per year. Our team works hands-on with a small number of startups over 3 months, and the application deadline to the accelerator is May 25th. We also have a series of these speakers over the next months. The next talk you'll be able to find on the website at pair.vc/speakers. And today, I'm very pleased to welcome panelists to this event, Steve Weinstein, a Stanford instructor of Hacking for Defense, and someone who I learned a lot through the Lean Launchpad class at Stanford as well. Paige Browne, CEO, founder of Windborne, a Pair portfolio company, and Will Dickson, principal at FedTech. Paige, would you be able to just give a brief intro to your background in relevance to non-dilutive funding?
Sure. So as Ian mentioned, I'm the CEO at Windborne. And so we are a new type of weather forecasting company for the 21st century. So we dispatch constellations of long duration balloons that can fly to target important data in the atmosphere and work to improve the accuracy of weather forecasts. So my background with non-dilutive funding involves an application to the NOAA SBIR grant. And we were selected for a phase 1 for the Air Force SBIR grant. And we were tentatively selected for the phase 2, which is a $1.5 million award. And we're also in the process of applying to the NSF SBIR grant. Ian, I think you're muted.
Steve, could you also give us a background in relation to non-dilutive funding?
Sure. Hey, welcome everyone. I'm Steve Weinstein. I have like two, touch points with non-dilutive funding. One is I teach Hacking for Defense and at Stanford, which is a national program, started at Stanford and now in, I think, 30 some odd universities, basically creating dual use companies. That means commercial and government companies. And a lot of those companies coming out of that effort are looking for phase 1 funding and hopefully even straight to phase 2 funding, which I guess we'll get into a little bit as we talk today. As well as I work with a bunch of companies through an organization that I direct, which is called H4X Labs, h4xlabs.com, which has working with ONR, Office of Naval Research, Department of the Navy, on basically helping phase 1 companies and some phase 2 companies become dual use companies. So we work with a small set of companies in one of the cohorts of the phase 1s right now. And we're just starting working with some on phase 1s, just who are going to get awarded next week or 2 weeks.
Right. And Will, could you also provide an introduction and also maybe just to paint a picture of the landscape of non-dilutive funding?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm principal at FedTech here. We're a venture builder based out of Washington, D.C. And we work on a very early stage mostly. So our longest running program, and here's my only plug for the night. If you're an entrepreneur or want to be an entrepreneur, we do this awesome startup studio program where we partner with federal labs across the U.S. to help license the technology. And we use that to juice your ability to start a business as an entrepreneur. So we call that our startup studio program. And the next cohort of that launching is called the Defense Innovation Accelerator, actually. So we work with a lot of the defense labs, find some really awesome tech, pair it with you as an entrepreneur through the program, boot camp, boom, start a really cool business, leverage some of this non-dilutive funding. But aside from Startup Studio at FedTech, we run a few custom accelerators, which are more the traditional accelerators you would have heard of for small businesses, with that focus on using the government as a funding partner, but also just kind of resource partner and customer. And then the other two products we do are kind of innovation training for large orgs, kind of taking those lessons learned from the venture world and applying them to large technical organizations. And then finally, a little bit of tech scouting from our purview across the US kind of innovation IP landscape. Fun fact, $150 billion a year spent on federally funded R&D across the US. So part of our mission is trying to make that more efficient and help provide impact into the world. in parallel with some of the awesome science that's going on. And I guess with that, I'll dive a little bit into kind of the landscape of non-dilutive funding. I'll preface it and say I think maybe the best type of non-dilutive funding is just selling something or providing services that someone will pay you for, the old bootstrapping method. So that's definitely, go for that. And we've actually seen a lot of small businesses pivot to a services model, even though you all are probably very passionate about lots of technologies, pivoting to a service model where you can kind of co-develop some expertise in this downturn by providing services to governments or large organizations through contracts can help stem, ebb the tide there. But there's kind of two different lenses that I think to think of non-dilutive funding. The first one I'll say is geographic. So if you start with like the micro local stuff people are familiar with, which would just be universities, right? If you have any connection to a university or a friend that is a student, even a grad student, usually that's all you need is one person on the team to be one person in the company to be a member of the university. There's a ton of prize money out there. You can easily get 25, 50, 100K from most big research universities as non-dilutive funding through prize money. So that's awesome. Go for that if you have the connections. And then as you step up, think about local and state as well, especially in some of the more, we'll say mission-driven areas. You think about sustainability, energy storage. Like I used to work in Massachusetts, and the state actually had millions of dollars of grants for startups every year focused on developing tech in that realm. So think about local and state options where you live. And then finally, federal. And the federal, I'll get a little bit deeper into here, but federally, the non-dilutive funding, again, one little preface here is don't think of it as just like a grant to grow the business, because at the end of the day, it's taxpayer money, and it needs to be mission driven. A lot of the deliverables that you're going to have to go to and work to is doing some research or engineering in partnership with some government entity needs to be to advance the technology and to potentially help the government's mission, one organization's mission. Not think about venture funding where it's really just about growing the business, not necessarily solving a particular mission. So one little caveat there to start it, but people talk a lot about SBIRs. So SBIRs, Small Business Innovative Research, and then the close sister funding, Small Business Technology Transfer, STTRs. A lot of funding, and the history behind this, any federal research organization that receives over $100 million a year to do research, they have to set aside, they have to pay a 3% tax to fund the SBIR program. So if you can imagine, 3% of $100 million, a lot of organizations out there that do this type of research for the government, they're required to set that aside and propose topics for small businesses like yourselves to do research under. So definitely the best way, and there's a lot of variables that you want to think about when you're going through some of this early stage funding from the federal level. But number one is that it's all got to be very competitive. It's heavily regulated in terms of how it's competed. So it's a little bit different from the private world, where if you find a customer and they want to pay you, you can just do it, right? No questions asked. The government, even if you do happen to find that customer, you need to go through the SBIR program or another kind of competitive entity. And I'll mention a few more of them here. So SBIR, STTR, the most widely known great ones. A lot of times it's like 100, 150K for phase one, go up to $1.5 million for phase two. And then the phase three stuff just means you can be sole source. So you enter kind of the door of the government of the Army, Navy, or even just, the NSF, other non-defense focused agencies that, want to invite you to do business with you. If you've done a SBIR phase 1 or 2, you've checked that box to say, I've competed for doing this. Now I can just, operate like a normal business. So that's really the beauty of why people talk about SBIR and STTR, because if you can apply to one of those and get in, your possibilities with the government of the customer open up, exponentially after that.
Great.
Some of the other funding mechanisms to look out for: broad agency announcements, which are like really super long documents published by government entities talking about the type of research they want to do. And you can actually get great contact information for scientists and program managers inside of those broad agency announcements. And then the other one is other transaction authority, which is usually a consortium model. So if you're, for example, doing electric vehicle technologies, you pay a small fee of a few $100 a year to join this consortium, and you get a lot of unique funding opportunities from that as well. And I'll stop there. We can kind of come back to it, but that's kind of the high level of the different types of funding that are available for the first road in. There's plenty of contracts and grants and programs of record that you might have heard of, small companies like Lockheed Martin and BAE Systems and Northrop Grumman, and they operate at a little bit different scale from small businesses. So.
Great, thank you, Will. That was great. Steve, when a startup founder comes to you and asks you whether you think that they would be relevant for an SBIR or other sources of government funding, how do you go about thinking whether they would be relevant? What advice do you give them in terms of maybe it's the stage of startup or the industry or the product they're working on? Oh, Steve, you're on mute.
I have a train going by and I put it on mute, so you're going to hear a train. First, to take a step back, the SBIR program, just to go on a little bit for 2 more seconds, is a cadence of 3 or 4 times a year where each agency opens up the door for people to apply, right? And you apply at large numbers. You know, historically, 20% of the people who apply for phase 1s get phase 1s. The number's been going up recently, so that it's, you know, your ability to get one is, you know, still low. You know, FWorks, which is a higher one, has been giving more out phase 1s. But when I meet a company, the first thing I want to do is decide whether if they're a dual use company, if they're selling something that would have value to the government, right? If they don't have that, then the SBIR really is, as Will pointed out, might divert the company going down a project-based pathway. The second thing that I look at if they're dual use is where are they in the stage of the company? Phase 1 is really, you know, basically been historically from ideation on out. You know, they're starting basically, they're exploring whether there's a market, so what phase are they in their kind of their journey? The next thing that I think about when I look at those companies is determine if having a government sole source ability, as Will pointed out, you know, in the future, you know, they don't have to compete, or having the, you know, the validation of working with the government makes them more investable. Remember that these early stage companies, the government is an awful customer. The government is an awful customer. They have to frequently compete. They frequently have to delay, and you never know who you're selling to and whether they're going to buy and whether you succeed. So you have to need that as a customer. Luckily for a lot of companies, the government has been doing things by reinventing the SBIR program at some level, making it from the time of award to grant. You know, it could be as much as 6 months now, as, you know, trying to do it in days. But these are all reasons why you really have to want the government as a customer. The good thing about it is non-dilutive capital. The good thing about it is that you do get access to people who maybe you wouldn't get normally access to. Those are all the good things. The bad sides, you know, you have to take into account is if you succeed, you have to become a compliant company, a government compliant company. That's usually called DCAA audits or something like that. And that's a very significant business decision if you succeed, right? So it really depends on the company. If it's dual use, they look like the government will validate their technology, and they could, and the venture capital, their board would be excited. You know, their board or their advisors would accept this as a good potential pathway for funding, right? If none of those are the case, then don't do it.
Got it.
Again, then it's a last resort. You know, it's a great last resort of funds too.
Do you think it's worth the effort to do phase 1 only? Or do you think you should only really commit the time and effort to do phase 1 with a view to going on to phase 2?
Well, first of all, you could, you know, you can go straight to phase 2. Some programs allow you to go phase 2, which can be over $1 million, you know, depending upon the program. But phase 1 is $150,000. It could validate some of your thinking, you know, and it's, you know, it's 3 to 6 months. It's, you know, people think it's a heavy lift to apply for. It really is not that heavy a lift. Will and Paige probably can talk more about that. It's not that hard to do, and it's $150,000. So if you're looking, if that money is a meaningful amount of money, and you're going to work on a project that aligns with the government, then sure, do it. Just go to phase 1. Remember though, and this is key to all of you, you have to think about your IP, your intellectual property, and making sure that you do not pollute it in a way that will make you less investable, you know, after you get one of these grants. So
what do you mean by that, Steve?
So the government's paying you, they're giving you non-dilutive money, but they're giving you the money for a project. And that project has ownership rights, right, for the government. And depending upon how you structure it and how you do the work, but if the government paid for it, they get rights to it. I mean, it's a simple way to think about it. And that is, you know, you just have to think that through during your, how you execute on your work to make sure that the government, they might own some of it, but doesn't own enough that they, jeopardize your intellectual property patent rights for investment later or other aspects of your business, right? Your VCs.
I might caveat that a little bit. I think most of the time the government retains government usage rights. They don't necessarily take, like you can always sell it commercially and almost.
Oh yeah, but yes, but it's still, you know, it's not sole ownership anymore.
Yeah,
right?
And there's some usage rights. Yeah.
Great, that was very informative. Paige, can you tell us, could you share your journey from going from the stage of even considering whether to apply for grants, researching which grants to go for, and then making the application?
Sure. So, so we looked primarily at the SBIR grants, and kind of in the process of deciding which grants to apply for, we took a look at some of the announcements and looked at what they were specifically asking for. Some types of grants, some agencies will put out requests that are open topic. So this is like the Air Force grant. They're open topic and you can submit any idea, and then you just have to make sure that you find an end user for it within the government. Some of them have specific topic ideas that they already put out. So for example, within NOAA, they have a specific topic that you have to try to match your research to. The reason that we decided to go down the route of non-dilutive funding is because it retains a lot of our equity ownership, and for us, our technology was particularly well suited for non-dilutive funding, just because the weather is something that the government cares a lot about in a lot of different sectors. It affects a number of different aspects of life across those different sectors. So that's kind of how we decided to go down the path of non-dilutive funding. So then we started looking for topics that might be a match to ours and started applying for the open topic ones. We ended up working with a consultant for the Air Force SBIR. So that was very helpful. We did find a lot of value in working with a consultant, somebody who's been through the process before with a number of other companies, and who has that experience and could kind of answer the questions that came up as we went through it. There were a lot of questions that came up. It's a complicated process. And then, so we went through, completed the applications, got them submitted. And for the AFWERX SBIR, it's kind of a process where you apply for it initially, and then you have to go through and reach out to a number of customers within the Air Force and try to find somebody who's interested in what you're providing. And so that was 3 months of intensive customer outreach. So you have to make sure that you have that time set aside, that you have at least one person dedicated just pretty much all the time working on this, on trying to track somebody down who's a good fit. Sometimes you might get lucky and find somebody in the first week. Sometimes it takes all 3 months. It can be difficult to get people to commit to organization, to this type of program. Even though it is sort of free money, it's very difficult to sort of worm your way into the different layers of the government, and it's quite an opaque organization. So we went through that process with the grant, found somebody who's a good fit for us, and who wanted to work with us, and then went through the whole application process for the phase 2. Yeah.
Can you tell us how long it took to do those different steps of the process? So you told us about reaching out to customers. What about the researching part? How many hours or days did that take to figure out even to go with AFWERX? And then once you decided that, how long it took to write the application?
I'd say that the researching part didn't take too long. That was, we ended up talking to another pair portfolio company, Learn to Win, and we got some information from them, got some information from a number of other people in the ecosystem, some people at BM&T, and just realized that it was a good choice for us. And then at that point, the application itself was probably about a month of work, but at a low duty cycle. So maybe a couple hours a day for about a month, getting that application together. There's a lot of finicky details with like your budget, and you got to make sure that it's exactly right and the numbers add up properly. You got to make sure that that you've written a good, you've put together a good presentation, you've written a good technical summary, that you're really getting across not just how your technology is useful to the government, but also how your technology is useful in a commercial context. Mm-hmm. And for that, it can be useful to have external validation points. So you really want to have evidence of external VC funding, evidence of external customers. You want to prove to the government that this is something which is viable outside of what of just your relationship with the government as well.
Great, thank you. Will, could you share your view on how these kind of timescales and amount of effort changes between the different maybe SBIRs or the different potential programs one can apply to?
Yeah, I mean, I think, SBIRs, and you'll hear the term white paper thrown around a lot, and you write one, you start getting good at writing them. So I think it's definitely kind of exponential growth of efficiency. Once you get that first one under your belt, you can start writing them for any program you can find out there. But I think the other thing to mention in terms of like timelines and effort is that like these programs, if you're a savvy CEO, they can be used very, very efficiently to develop your technology for commercial application. And what I mean by that is that, if you're, say you have a cool battery chemistry, you're like, I got this sweet battery chemistry, I want to go put it into electric vehicles. And traditionally you would have just gone the venture route. I'm going to sell the commercial market, billions of dollars, get that initial influx, build a factory, yada, yada. If you can communicate the value of that to the government, say, hey, this new battery chemistry is, we had a company in one of our programs that has a cobalt-free battery chemistry. Cobalt right now is mined primarily in China and Africa, and mines that are controlled by China, adversaries to the United States, right? So they were able to get a bunch of great government early stage non-dilutive funding to do this sort of research, right? And you build it up where it's like, hey, I'm going to try to use this money, this opportunity with the government to parallel path going from battery chemistry to functional prototype. And then after that, I'm going to pivot off and go the commercial route, right? And all that money and time you would have had to spend venture funded or, scrapping around for money, all of a sudden, you help the government scratch their back when it comes to advancing the technology in that state, something they're interested in, but you're able to do some early stage development prior to selling a product for yourself.
Great, very clear. Steve, can you give any advice on where entrepreneurs should focus to actually win? So you shared that only 20% of applications are approved.
So that was 20% historically. It's changing dramatically. The SBIR program is very much in flux. Every agency is changing the rules. AFWorks kind of has opened the aperture. They are looking for more companies, period. They've increased the percentage of grants dramatically. Other parts of the NSF have done that. All of them are looking to bootstrap a lot of companies. Right. So, I mean, the other thing is that some topics are what Paige called open topics. That means any idea can fly. That means the burden of proof on you is a lot, to prove that you're worthy in a big field. There are still many topics that are across other agencies that are very specific. And they are looking for, battery technology to do X, like Will's example, and those are the traditional phase one was very pre-product market fit. It was very early on. It was truly meant to be an R&D ideation. We think we can do this, not that we're already doing it. that mindset has changed because SBIR has been, up to now, one could argue how successful as a program it is. If you think you're spending 3% of everybody's budget on this program, how much comes out the other end, and everybody's looking to improve it. So you're seeing open topics, you're seeing fast contract to award, you're seeing different contract vehicles being used, not forcing you to be a government savvy company. All of those things are changing. So if you're looking out there, there are a lot of websites basically, that focus, the government ones on challenge, and grants.gov and all those are the first place you go. But, understand, look at prior SBIR grant, topics. Look out there to places that, and, as Will does, he works with all the Fed labs, so he knows technologies that are being looked at there. Those are the first places you look. People who are already working on your problem, right? That they've done even RFPs out on those. The one thing that we didn't bring up is there are also challenges out there. Will kind of made a little bit of an example. They're not just, we keep talking to SBIR because it's $2.5 billion a year. It's a lot of money there. But there are a lot of grants, out there and challenges. And those challenges are very interesting, and the government has quite a few of those. So that's another place I might investigate. But, think about who would be your customer, right? Basically, who would be your customer? And that's where you would go searching, right? If they're not like, Paige's, Noah's their customer at some level, So it's kind of mining Noah, looking for it. And LinkedIn is always your friend, just looking for people's titles who have what you want and just talking to them.
Yeah, I want to chime in real quick. One of the prize competitions that the Army runs is called X-Tech Search, and we run an accelerator for the finalists of that program. So, perfect example from Steve, but AFWorks run prize, and it's prize money. It's not even grant money. You can do whatever you want with it. You can go on a big vacation. No one's done that yet, but there are some really sweet prize competitions out there. And then the second thing I would just want to stamp on that Steve said is, really reach out to the actual humans behind a lot of these things, like SBIRs and any sort of government thing. If you find it early enough, it's going to have a contact number. There's going to be a period that you can reach out and ask clarifying questions and connect and make sure you can align your proposal with what they want. Organizations like AFWorks try to make it a lot easier where you don't have to do that. But traditionally, all the contact information is out there, and some people say that you won't win any SBIRs if you don't actually talk to the PM who's behind it. So find the contact. The contact information is number one thing. Emails, phone numbers, all over the internet.
Valuable advice. Speak to your customers. I understand that in the past, SBIRs have been very focused on novel technology, or maybe that's where they came from. You mentioned R&D. Is that still the case? If you're not a company that has novel technology, can you still win?
I don't know, Steve, if you want to take that. I think traditionally the mission is technology. People talk in technology readiness levels all the time in the government. There might be some edge cases where someone's looking for a, relatively short horizon problem, or solution for something, but most of the time they do want to be advancing technology development.
So yes, that there's a huge percentage still goes to pure tech. But there's a lot of one that I'll go that is product first, solving problem first. You're seeing that a lot in in some of the programs where they just have a problem, and you might not have unique tech, but you have tech that can be used to do it. They're not looking at your patent portfolio only. They're looking at whether you have a solution. And in this world, in this SaaS world or cloud world, or, a lot of people are taking various components and just integrating them in an interesting way, right? They're not like, if you're a machine learning company, you're probably not doing the algorithms. It might be your data set or something else that brings up, you up above to solve a problem, because they're all looking, the ultimate goal of the SBIR program is products that are in capabilities that the government buys at scale, right? We always talk about phase 1 and phase 2. Those are really the SBIR program. Sometimes people talk about something called phase 3, and that really isn't really truly part of the SBIR program. That basically says you found the customer, Okay, you found the customer and you were allowed to take advantage of the advantages of the SBIR, sole source, and other. But and they might help you on ramp you into those, but that's usually left to the company to figure out. And even though it's a phase 3, so what happened is historically, SBIR 2 never got the companies far enough, and they started part 2 phase 2 of SBIR phase 2s, part B, because they realized companies needed a little more baking. So, but those phases, are out there. It is complicated to apply the first time, but as Will said, the second time is easier, and you actually can do it yourself. But I think a lot of accelerators, incubators, and consultants out there can help you do it because there is a rhythm and a format.
Got it. Does it help or hinder to have a VC investor before, or even angel investors? Does it move the dial at all on the strength of application?
Phase 2s, absolutely. At least that. But they, even though they say commercialization is a criteria for evaluation, I would say my understanding, is that it's not counted as much as it should be.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah,
I don't know what you think, Will.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. I think phase 2, and that's a really good maybe plug we can make for the good old government on matching funds. So a lot of like government entities now, they're doing this thing, matching fund grants, where AFWorks is a perfect example, but they will actually match, I think $2 or $3 million if you have won a phase 1 AFWorks prize and can prove you're working on a problem the Air Force cares about. And then you say, hey, I'm going to go raise venture money, $1.5 million. The Air Force will go find $1.5 million of non-dilutive funding to just give you on top of that venture money. Probably one of the most extreme versions of the government doing that, but hey, great for small businesses. So everyone should try to be looked to take advantage of it.
Yeah, what they'll do is, AFWorks has a program where they'll match venture money 1-for-1. They'll give you the SBIR phase 2 money, but you also frequently have to bring a customer who's willing to sign up in the government for it. So you can, so for the same amount of money, you can get even more than $1.5 million. You can get 3 million or so of non-dilutive.
Yeah, exactly. Find the customer is hard though. Kind of like what Paige was alluding to. It's, that's frankly like what we do with our like government focused accelerators is like demystifying the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. It is complicated. I used to work for a big car company and did the same thing. And this is like exponentially more complicated.
Great. Do you see any myths or misconceptions about applying to these sources of funding in terms of changing your chance of winning, or what steps you need to do in this process? Will or Steve?
Yeah, myths and misconception about applying to the programs, not really. I mean, it's at least at this point in time, I think it's still definitely just an under-advertised program that most people don't understand. And there's enough people, you get far enough away from Washington, D.C., and you just don't think about the government ever. It's just not something most people think about. It's how they spend their money, aside from local stuff. So really, I don't see any downside. I actually asked this question to another SBIR expert recently, and he said, nope, there's literally no downside. But again, the government kind of does take the government usage rights, for them to use it in future government-focused technologies. But aside from that, you're free to commercialize it as you wish outside of that.
Yeah, I think one of the myths was that it took forever to get the contract after you got the award. And I think, that is actually changing quite dramatically. It used to literally take months, if many months, and now there's a lot more flexibility. AFWorks has done things in days and weeks. Other programs are, 1 to 2 months from the time you get the award to the time you get your, you're on contract. So those are things that are have come. The other one is that the government is getting a little more flexible on your contracting vehicles that they will let you use. They used to think that they were just getting somebody who was government savvy, and now they've started moving away from that a little bit, but that's a slower movement in the sense that you don't have to be DCA compliant for a while. That's the government audit, basically, seal of approval, that you're at least following the rules. So, but those things are changing. So I think it's getting easier to get the grants. I think they are giving more grants And so those myths are going away. And I think they're getting more, albeit slowly, more flexible in how your grant has to look. I think that one is going to take a while for them to, so.
All good news.
Yeah.
Great to hear that. Paige, you mentioned that you used a consultant to help you through the process. How did you go about even picking the consultant, finding them, evaluating which one to use? And then how did they actually work with you?
Yeah, so we actually got a recommendation from one of the mentors that we were working with through the PAIR program. We talked to him. He'd been through some from some SBIRs before, and he recommended them as an organization. And we did a little bit of research and found that they were one of the prominent ones in the space, and had a good track record of getting companies through. So we decided to work with them. And that was definitely the right choice in my opinion. They were able to help us along the process and help us understand, like, decode the government language when we get emails, understand what exactly they were trying to tell us. They were able to give us information about statistics from their previous companies about how, if you get it to a certain stage, what's the odds of getting past this and stuff like that. And they were even able to help us get started with giving us some contacts for outreach. So getting in touch with the actual people that would be our potential customers.
Great. Steve, do you have any advice on how to select a consultant?
I think, you have to, I think personal recommendation, right? I think I would look for companies that have worked with that person. I think that's, the first way. There are a lot of people, because it's not a lot of money, right? It's up to $150,000. So, there's not a lot of money to pay someone there. And if you make a mistake, it's a lot of your effort. So I would go with personal recommendations.
Great. Can you recommend like a fair price point to pay a consultant for phase 1, phase 2? Steve or Will, maybe?
I'm not sure. I think, it's really up to, think about SBIR phase 1, it's like 100 something, 100, sometimes it's 50, up to 100, 150. How much do you really care about winning it, right? If it's someone who's really done a bunch, 1%, 0.5%, $500, $1,000, sometimes, if they're going to really take the leadership role in it.
It goes up a lot. There are people who, depends upon how much involved they are post and how much they're involved pre, right? It's all over the map. That's why I think you need to get a recommendation, right?
Yeah, and with the one that we were working with, it's also set up so that you pay when you get the grant. So it's a percentage of the grant. So it's not like you have to pay upfront and then you're screwed if you don't get it. So they do have it set up like that.
On a contingency basis only.
Yeah.
Okay.
And while they are extremely useful, it is possible to do this by yourself. I would say there's
100%. There's enough examples, and I will also put a plug in there if you're looking into the Air Force SBIR or NSF SBIR. All of these organizations have small business offices that would love to talk to you and give you guidance on how to structure a white paper or a proposal. If you think, someone mentioned this the other day in one of our webinars, but look for the organizations that are also incentivized by you as a non-traditional government contractor, small business, to win. And that every single government organization has a small business office. There's people like AFWorks, like the Army's X-Tech Search Program, the Navy's Naval X Program, NASA's Small Business Office. Everybody's got these small business office trying to help you win. So you can get a lot of free resources just by talking to those people.
And if you're associated with a university, frequently the university has somebody associated with it that they can just offer as a mentor or help, right? If back to anybody on your team who has a university affiliation, they all have offices that frequently have government people who've worked in it or actually on site. The other thing is, if you're in a university town, there are a lot of people in the town who might be going to that university who are actually on some sort of leave from the military, leave from something, or taking executive ed, and they are also available who might have some very interesting knowledge of both contacts or how to apply.
Fantastic. If a founder has applied for an SBIR, they've started the process for phase one, and then they pivot on their idea, so it's changed relative to their application. Do they need to retract the application? Can they edit it? What's the process? What happens in that case?
So to understand the question is, they haven't received the grant, or they've received the grant?
We can take both stages. So
if they haven't received the grant, then they're going to be kind of, they can't go fix it. And, I come from the film industry. You can't fix it in post. But after you get the grant, you potentially, depending upon your point of contact, your technical point of contact in the government, you might be able to tell them the change, and they might accept it. But if they wanted what you built, it's a tough slog, my opinion.
Yeah, no, agreed. And that's an important thing to remember, that like the SBIR is a grant to do a specific scope of work.
Yeah.
It's not just like, it's not like venture money where you can, there's kind of a general direction you need to go, but you can spend however you need to. It's you spell it out, and when you win that SBIR, what it's going to be, what problem you're going to be solving.
But the nice thing about phase ones is, depending upon if they're more, product market fit already, you're already a going company, those are harder to change. But if there are true R&D SBIR, then you can say, my research showed me this. You might not be acceptable for a phase two, right? Because they wanted you to actually do what they thought in the phase one, but it does allow you some pivoting room that your evidence shows. But again, it really depends upon your relationship with what's called the TPOC, and their rigidness and and how you wrote your proposal, right?
Okay.
What are your milestones for this is all milestone driven, right? You have 3 to 6 months on your phase one. You got 1 to 2 years on your phase two, and they're all milestone driven.
Is it possible to apply to multiple agencies at the same time, or even multiple times to the same agency?
So it is possible to apply to multiple agencies, but you have to be really careful that you're not double dipping with the work that you're putting out. So that was one thing that we had to be careful of when we were writing different applications for the Air Force, for the NSF, and for NOAA, that each topic was on a different technical innovation, that all of them combined together are pushing forward our company, but you can't get a grant for the same exact work that you're doing. That's fraud, basically.
Got it. And Paige, through interacting with those 3 different organizations, can you maybe share a bit about the characteristics or the different personalities of those organizations? Steve mentioned that AF Works is very quick, and it's been leading the field in innovation. Can you maybe share a bit on the different characteristics of the ones you engage with?
Yeah, I think that's an accurate assessment. AFWorks is quick. AFWorks is also really new. So one of the things that we ran into is a lot was changing over the course of even just the 3 months that we were interacting with them for our phase one. The rules and the solicitation, it went through major changes. They would be in contact with us basically every week. We'd have a call, and they'd tell us, okay, this is the new rule. Disregard all the stuff that we said before. And so it was really in flux. I think that that's going to be quieting down as they really settle into what they want to be. NOAA is definitely in the older version of this. They have very specific application requirements, very specific topics. So they move very slowly as well. NSF is kind of in between those. NSF has got kind of a revamped procedure. They have an open application so that you can apply basically at any time for the phase one. They do quarterly reviewing times. So I think the next one coming up is June 4th. If you get an application in by then, it gets reviewed within about 6 months or so. So they're really more transparent, I think, on their website. A lot of good FAQ, NOAA is definitely a little bit more outdated on that front.
Okay. Anything to add to that, Will and Steve?
No, I don't think, I mean, I think it's good. I mean, I think that's good advice.
Yeah, I might add a little maybe insider flavor on it, but you know, AFWorks is very sexy externally right now, but think about maybe the other agencies that are a little jealous. They don't have a really sexy program like AFWorks, and pay attention to them as they try to catch up. Might be some maybe a little bit more lucrative opportunities for small business than might normally be.
Right, and they have, as Paige pointed out, they have topics that are more explicit, and therefore it's easy. They know the customer a little bit more likely than the AFWorks, where they don't actually, they make you do the heavy lifting of knowing who the end user customer will be at the end. So there's some advantage of going to these more explicit ones. They are slow to grant, but everybody's getting faster to grant. Everybody, you know, I mean, you'll just see it over time. They're just, you know, they're all seeing, oh, this can be done. You know, the evaluation process sometimes used to take months. Now some people have decided overnight to do it in 2 weeks, right? Because they, you know, literally they'll go, the next round we're going to do in 2 weeks. And that changes, you know, how they look at it and who they bring in. But I think over the next year, you're going to see a lot of change for the better for everyone in this regard, both for the government and for the small companies.
Let me add like a little anecdote on why that is. I think maybe it's a little context for people who aren't familiar, but like the reason all the government is, you know, and especially the DoD, Department of Defense, and all these, the Air Force especially, right? There's this interesting stat that back during the Cold War, the government was funding, I think, $3 to every $3 of publicly funded technological innovation to every $1 of private money, and that's flip-flop now. So the government, especially the Defense Department, is feeling left out, right? And you can imagine why. They see all this awesome tech innovation happening in Silicon Valley, and they're like, "Whoa, you know, we're the country we're the services that protect you as a country. Why didn't you come to us to let us use this technology?" So it is a significant pain point to kind of validate. Like to me, when I started getting involved, a lot of it almost seemed like too good to be true. Like, man, this is super small business startup friendly. But it is a major pain point, you know, and the government just, it's really the pain point they just want to be thought about. You know, think about the government as a customer. That's the reason all these things are getting a lot easier for any sort of startup or small business to contribute to.
Great. Is there anything that we haven't covered today that you think is important for founders to consider?
I mean, I think they should look at, there are other avenues of money, right, that we didn't talk about. Like in some cases, there are tax credits that are available that you know, and tax, you know, incentives in various parts in the country, small tax, everything from rent abatement all the way up to actually giving you some money. You know, I mean, Will started his talk on that. I think that's something you should look at. You know, if you actually do have some kind of technology that you're looking and your venture capital is not coming, there are other ways to get, you know, kind of sell off a little bit of royalty financing, and there are just other ways to think about. You know, if your traditional venture capital pathway is you know, is taking too much upfront, or you just want to kind of wait out and not have new overlords, you know, there are other ways to get money. But the SBIR program is, and the grant and the challenges, it's getting easier, in my opinion. You know, you're seeing people like doing it in the last couple of years. You know, the number of people who were non-traditional, what's called non-traditional applicants. There is a very rigorous program in almost every agency to get new tech in that doesn't come from traditional vendors. And so that used to be a negative, and now it's a positive, right? We never heard of those people before, right? Is not necessarily a bad thing, right?
Great.
If I could add one more thing, I'd like to put a plug in for another program called I-Core, which is also government affiliated, and it is a way to, well, it's set up to transfer technology from universities to the commercial space. And it's a kind of based on the Lean Launchpad, Steve Blank's sort of guidance on customer outreach and learning how to go to potential customers and have interviews with them and understand what they're looking for, and understand how you shape what you're offering to make it something that they actually need. And for us, we actually participated in that before we went into the SBIR program, and it was a really big, valuable step for us. And I think there's similar programs like the Hacking for Defense class that really get you prepared to actually go through that outreach process and find a customer for the open topic SBIRs.
It's actually Steve Blank and I, team the Lean for Launchpad and the Hacking for Defense. So Steve is involved in it, but a good plug for ICOR. Every university has it. Pretty much a lot of internal government agencies have it. If you go to venturewell.org or com, you can see a lot about it, or if you go to NSF, you can see a lot about it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Very valuable advice. I'm so pleased to have you all on the panel today, Will, Paige, and Steve. Really appreciated it. And we'll be posting this video online as well, so people can look back at it afterwards. Thank you so much. And I just want to say that we're holding rolling interviews now for our Pair Summer Accelerator. The application deadline will be the 25th of May. And we have more talks coming up. The next one is with Dennis Woodside, the president of Impossible Foods and former COO of Dropbox. They'll be on May 14th at 4 p.m. So thank you again, Paige, Steve, and Will. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you, Ian.